I want to get one thing straight before we start this video. I'm in no way defending Daniel Larson. And I want to make that very clear that I don't support him or any of his actions or anything that has affected people that he's done. However, I will be talking about the trolling of a person with very obvious cognitive and mental disorders. I'm not here to play devil's advocate, and I'm not here to demonize people involved, even though I will be demonizing some people. I'm not going to, just lump everyone together into the same category and be like, oh my god, I fucking hate them. But I feel like there's so many videos about Daniel Larson, and most of it is just kind of the same take over and over and over again, and it's just kind of become this like low-hanging fruit to make a video on, and I feel like there needs to be at least some conversation had about the underlying themes of Daniel, like the management or, specific trolls that need to be called out and held accountable. I feel like there needs to be at least a little reflection into some of these locale stories and the situations they've been put into, sometimes unfairly, sometimes not, but I feel like there should be a conversation about certain people, more particularly Daniel Larson and a few others. So at this point, I feel like we all know who Daniel is, or at least are very well aware of him, from crashing a Roe v. Wade protest,
because of my autism, my grandmother passed away of cancer,
to even running for president. There's no hiding from his social media presence. And because of that, he's become one of the most popular and infamous lolcows, right next to Christine, Weston, Ricardo, Sonichu, Crizel, Rose 2, Jesus Christ, Chandler, the CPU goddess. Okay. However, something is happening with Daniel Larson that we've never really seen with any other previous lolcow, or at least one as popular as him besides Chris. Daniel Larson, late April this year, was arrested and federally charged with 7 counts consisting of 6 counts of use or threatened use of explosive, and 1 count of interstate communication of threats, which, if convicted, has the potential of putting him in jail for multiple decades. These bomb threats Daniel makes are very obviously something that he can't and wouldn't do, not because he doesn't, want to bomb the fucking White House, but because it's very obvious that Daniel isn't capable of making or going through with a threat, and simply lashing out with the most violent thing he can kind of think of. And you'll see why in a minute, especially with a lot of trolls kind of, pretending to be the FBI and contacting him. Now, I'm not going to go into Daniel's full history here, but if you are interested, link below are 2 Larson documentaries you can use to learn what led us here. Let's go ahead and establish a few things about Daniel first. Firstly, Daniel has been officially diagnosed with both ADHD and autism. However, a lot of speculation leads me and a lot of other people to believe that Daniel has a form of bipolar disorder and a schizoaffective disorder, which can lead to delusions, hallucinations, impaired communication and speech, bizarre or unusual behavior, symptoms of depression, elevated anger, anxiety, mania, paranoia, and the excessive desire for sex. If you want to know everything there is to know about his psychology in particular, there is a link to Sonichu Psychology in the description, who made a very detailed video of Daniel Larson. The extent of Daniel Larson's intellectual disability, if he even has one at all, is unknown. However, his intellectual ability is seemingly somewhere in the high 60s to mid 70s IQ range, placing him in either mild intellectual disability or borderline intellectual functioning. According to the official Larson wiki, quote, Daniel is not the sharpest tool in the shed, having a very low mental age in comparison with his physical age. This is most apparent in the Tennyson Center interview, where during the interview, Daniel acts like a 7-year-old despite being 14 at the time of recording. His mental age is likely a factor behind his lack of understanding of money, and why he almost instantly blows all the money on what he should be spending on proper meals, housing, and medicine, on instead gambling, luxury goods like electronics, food at expensive restaurants, and bus rides to nowhere, end quote. It's very obvious to see in this video of Daniel Larson, showing him in the Tennyson Center, which is a place for kids to heal from trauma, abuse, and neglect from their households.
Boy. When I first came here, I actually was really nervous.
That's 14-year-old Danny, who came from an extremely neglectful home. When his grandmother got word of Danny's situation, she moved here from California to be his guardian.
Wonderful!
So he wouldn't end up in a foster home. Danny still lived at the center for a year and a half, but now lives with his grandma, continuing to go to school at Tennyson and receive treatment. Young boy with the world ahead of him.
This is wonderful today!
Danny and his grandmother have both seen huge improvements.
Make yourself feel happy.
He likes himself now. He feels good about himself. I'm not saying he's a finished job. He's got more work to do.
Now, if you thought Daniel was 7, 8, or even 10 in this video, I honestly would have agreed with you at the time. But he's actually 14 at the time of this recording. I feel like this shows how extreme the gap is between his physical age and his mental age, and it's in a very similar way to Chris, if not even worse here. Cognitively, he's a child, and it's extremely obvious to see in just this 3-minute segment from 12 years ago. Another important event in his life is the death of his grandmother from cancer, Daniel being anywhere from 19 to 22 at the time. Now Daniel, left with no family or support group, was left with only one person to care for him, that being Bob Proctor, someone very ill-equipped to handle someone like Daniel. Going from here, Daniel was exposed to the internet, where he would be lightly trolled and messed with occasionally. However, that quickly went to bullying and harassment, leading Daniel to become more anxious, angry, and emotional. All of that was your typical lolcow, nothing too out of the ordinary, fucked up of course, but nothing had happened yet, until the Pinterest or Printerest incident.
Somebody was telling me of some type of social platform called Printerest. Huh. I wonder what type of printer it uses.
So apparently, it was leaked that Daniel Larson had a Pinterest account full of young girls around 10 to 17 that he had apologized for using as, quote, material, and a map of all the ages of consent across the United States. Grace Vanderwall, being a key person in Daniel's history, was constantly seen in this board. These revelations led to an extreme influx of trolls and, quote, managers. In fact, shortly after this incident, Daniel was dropped from his disability housing and effectively homeless, not because of this incident, but most likely due to an outburst caused by Daniel's increased anxiety and paranoia. He even showed off pictures of his housing, where his managers allegedly caused him to punch holes in the walls and break furniture. In fact, there are so many instances of these managers getting Daniel to do extremely disgusting and even violent things for their amusement, almost similar in vein to Blue Spike. Actually, almost identical in some cases. So to detail my point, let's look into some of these incidents to understand what's going on.
We're back in the back printing off my nudes off of a website.
I'm performing a citizen's arrest, so the FBI is outside.
The Olive Garden incident occurred on December 10th, 2023. During Daniel Larson's YouTube live stream at a Denver, Colorado Olive Garden, Daniel, under a possibly manager-fed delusion, attempted to get him and Grace Vanderwall a reservation at said Olive Garden, but was subsequently trespassed and kicked out of the restaurant after repeatedly being told not to film inside, demanding a table for 8 people, causing a scene inside the restaurant when confronted, yelling expletives at the staff, attempting to perform a citizen's arrest on everyone's side, and most notably pulling the fire alarm at the prompt of his chat. So basically, a fake Grace Vanderwall and a few managers attempted to lure Daniel to an Olive Garden where he was promptly fooled and fed delusions of the Olive Garden mass-producing his nude photos. Afterwards, he confronts said managers and pulls the fire alarm. A video leaked to this subreddit in July depicting Daniel Larson taking out his toothbrush, inserting it into and proceeding to brush his own teeth with it. According to the wiki, Daniel was manipulated to do this by his management, more specifically Flexburger. The footage was found and posted to the Daniel Larson subreddit on July 21st, 2022, after the Pink Room arc had taken place. The May 6th incident, or simply May 6th, is the first known Daniel Larson incident, taking place on May 6th. The incident is infamous due to the fact that Daniel would expose himself on TikTok Live to nearly 500 people, before being quickly banned. Daniel had been convinced to do so by his former manager Flexburger, who had been actively trolling him after gaining knowledge of his status as an alleged pedophile.
No, I'm not. Those people are causing the situation. Stop fucking filming me, bitch! Try me, bitch! Try me, bitch! Try me, bitch! Try me, bitch! I will fucking murder you! I will fucking murder you, bitch!
Look at this crackhead.
I can go right fucking ahead! I can go right fucking ahead! Fans are leaking the location, bitch! Fans are leaking
On November 10th, 2023, at roughly 11:22 p.m., Daniel had a meltdown inside a Westminster, Colorado Panera Bread. This incident was filmed by bystanders, an employee from the store, and the managers he was on Discord with. The exact reason for the meltdown is unknown, though it appears to have stemmed from being recognized by fans who then proceeded to follow Daniel around and harass him. A member of the Discord server Daniel was on call with during the incident went on to claim that they weren't involved at all, and that this occurred naturally after a couple of fans had harassed Daniel. During the incident, a group of trolls were following Daniel around between locations, including but not limited to Dave & Buster's, Target, and an unknown restaurant. The peak of the incident was mainly caught by an employee. In the video, Daniel is dealing with two Panera Bread employees who are trying to get him to leave. Daniel refuses to leave, repeatedly yelling the phrase, "Try me, bitch," even throwing a table in their direction. Daniel then starts shouting about his fans leaking his location, and eventually, another employee calls the police. It's very obvious in watching these clips that Daniel's bipolar disorder and schizoaffective disorder are in full display here. All of these incidents being pushed either by paranoia from a group of people following him around or threats to him that he's being seen pushed by trolls. Daniel's paranoia obviously believing this, and because of that, it puts both him and everyone around him in danger. I think it shows how delusional he is, but it also shows how persistent his trolls are, since they're going to travel to him to follow him around and harass him. I feel like his paranoia wouldn't be so bad, and him lashing out wouldn't be as violent if these trolls weren't 24/7 trying to stalk him, harass him, and follow him around.
You're hanging out with a pedophile, you know that, right?
This person in the picture, in the video, has been following.
For like a video? Wait, let's try. Photos?
Hey! Back
You like that, Daniel?
Back away!
It's especially disgusting when trolls involve innocent people, which has in fact led to Daniel assaulting somebody. Daniel is very obviously a threat to himself, from the way he beats on his head to the point of bleeding, to the way he maintains his own well-being, having had scabies and other hygiene-related infections, and I mean, just look at him. Just look at him. With this information, I feel like we've established a lot of things. It's very obvious that Daniel cannot take care of himself, and cannot function without other people to care for him. It's also apparent that Daniel is extremely paranoid and shows extreme signs of schizoaffective disorder and symptoms of bipolar disorder. We've established that Daniel has grown up in an abusive, neglectful household. It's clear that Daniel cognitively acts and vents his frustrations like a child, throwing tantrums and failing to understand simple concepts. You can also note how trusting and gullible he is despite being so paranoid, showing evidence of him wanting to keep up his delusions through an anxious attachment style, not wanting to engage in a real partner, possibly as a result of having abusive, neglectful parents and the death of his grandmother, resulting in him attaching himself to delusions that obviously aren't true. And I know what some of you might be thinking. I've heard word about this too, but it is only an alleged thing, but I will still address it. It's about Daniel supposedly abusing his grandmother and mother before he got put into the Tennyson home. And while I don't completely think that's false, I don't think it's true either. Because even if it was true, I feel like it supports my argument a little more anyways. Because, you know, having a child like Daniel has some responsibility added on to it. It has a lot of responsibility. And if you're not able to care for a child like that, then you need to, ask for assistance, You know, you need to learn what they need. You need to understand what kind of condition they have. And not wanting to understand that and not catering to that is abuse. Because you're just treating it, you're not having a child to have a child. You're having a child for reasons that aren't for their well-being. And that's abuse. But in another sense, children don't act out of nowhere. They act out for a reason, and they model those behaviors on how to act out after their parents. If, say, Daniel grew up with an abusive father, perhaps Daniel gets abusive to get attention. Or perhaps, you know, I'm not a psychologist. I don't fucking know anything about psychology. I know very little about it. I'm trusting other people's opinions. But from what I know about children, they like to model behavior. And seeing as though Daniel throws tantrums. If the M&M story about Daniel throwing tantrums and them giving him M&Ms and just ignoring him, it's very obvious that Daniel was in a very neglectful household, and him acting out to get attention is obvious to me that he's not having his needs, any of his needs met. And I feel like that's not really a case to be like, oh, Daniel was born awful, because no one is born evil. No one's born disgusting. They're made that way by their parents, or behaviors that they have modeled by other people. But it's like, with Daniel, he has so many cognitive disabilities. He has so much going on, right? That I think it's unfair to say that because of his parents raising him in a shitty way, you know, or Daniel being a very obnoxious child makes him defaulted to not care about. Because, oh yeah, well, he was already this way anyways, which just isn't true. Seeing all this makes these managers seem like monsters eager to prey on a mentally unwell man for their enjoyment. People that get a kick seeing a homeless schizophrenic man scare himself into lashing out against random people, leading random people into these said dangerous situations. Trolls that led Daniel to living a life of abuse, torment, and fear that led him to be convicted for federal crimes for lashing out. I feel like a big blame is also reserved for the police of Colorado. Seeing an obviously unwell man lashing out at fake threats and fear, treat him as someone to be kind of waved away, where they just kind of jail him for an hour and then just let him go, even though people who have seen Daniel and psychologists who have talked to Daniel even say that he should not be let out. He needs to be helped. And then they just kind of let him go back onto the streets where he's gonna suffer, he's gonna get scabies, he's gonna it's disgusting. However, I've seen one defense of this abuse that made me want to make this video. Daniel pedophilia is something that I would deem irredeemable. Doing something like that to a child, or even the thought of doing that to a child, is something that should be prosecuted, and just absolutely, someone like that should be ostracized from society completely. And Daniel Larson has a very long-standing history with pedophilia, and is the most used excuse to excuse causing the abuse that Daniel has suffered throughout his life. Yes, Daniel is a disgusting person for being a pedophile and having pedophilic thoughts, but in no way does that justify any of the actions of the managers. Honestly, I question if Daniel even knows what's wrong with pedophilia. In fact, Daniel barely understands what sex even is, and is quoted as calling ejaculating, quote, the peeing feeling. And from someone who has spoken directly to him, quote, he has a very childish idea of what sex is and what sex is like, to the point where he idolizes sex and has very weird fantasies and ideas of how sex works. This furthers the point that he has a very childish mind, potentially even because of sexual abuse in the past, end quote. To shed some light on that, Daniel has multiple instances of coming out about sexual abuse that he's been victim to. This is incredibly important as there has been an incredibly strong link established between childhood abuse and pedophilia, as anywhere between 33% to 75% of child sex offenders report being sexually abused as children. According to a Canadian study, quote, those who have been sexually abused before age 16 sexually offended against significantly younger victims and had significantly more indicators of pedophilic interest, end quote. Daniel's pedophilic tendencies could be a traumatic response to events from his childhood. Of course, it's all he said, she said, but it's almost too specific and too fitting for me to at least not mention it. And with his household's abusive environment, it may not be too big of a stretch to say it may have happened. It really paints a picture of how Daniel can acquire an interest in kids. I feel like it's important to understand where these tendencies come from so it's easier to treat and understand. But back to Daniel's lack of understanding. Due to the lack of sexual understanding and the obvious cognitive impairment Daniel seems to have, I don't think Daniel even knows why it's wrong for him to be with a minor. Perhaps even subconsciously, Daniel being assaulted at an age of 10 through 14 caused him to have developed a liking for minors around said age. Perhaps this was even before his stay at the Tennyson Center. And on a more speculative note, maybe it's one of the reasons he was taken outside of the home. And with Daniel's obvious mental immaturity, who knows what effects sexual assault could have on him, especially if he was assaulted at age 10. Mentally, he could have been about 6 or 5. I'm not saying it absolves him from anything, because in the end he's still hurting a child. But isn't it more disgusting that instead of getting him help, instead of taking him to a path of recovery in a safe environment, these people led him to a path of reliving that same environment he was raised in, one that was cold, unloving, neglectful, and full of dangerous people. Especially looping him into situations where minors could be involved. I'm in no way trying to say that Daniel being a pedophile is excusable or even remotely so, but to understand and truly evaluate how he got here, there are people to blame. I want to bring up the Alex call in particular and look at that for a minute, because in this call, Alex admits to everything, admits that he's lied to Daniel, he's gotten Daniel in situations, he's, the cause of a lot of things. A lot of these situations that I've gone over, he was at least a part of. And Daniel, learning this, doesn't understand. He doesn't get it. He just says, oh, I don't want to lose a friend. He starts trying to appeal to Clark. And Clark's like, I lost my girlfriend over you. Trying to, I don't know, get some sympathy from Daniel. Trying to validate his actions to Daniel. Because he feels bad. Because he should. He should feel fucking awful for this. Because he's evil for this. It's disgusting. Like, dude, what is wrong with you? And then we're just going to pretend that he's fucking hilarious for this. We're just going to pretend that, he's some sort of like, oh my god, he's really funny. He's going to be part of Daniel Larson history. That's not a fucking good thing. That's a terrible thing. Like, dude. And it's like, you could tell Daniel doesn't understand. You can tell Daniel doesn't get it. He doesn't understand it because he never will. Like, it's fucking Daniel, right? He's... Like, everything that I've outlined in this video has been that Daniel cannot take care of himself. Daniel is cognitively not there. He cannot understand it. He's delusional. He can't understand it. He doesn't get it. So Alex is, I call him Alex, fucking Alex, whatever. Fucking Clark, right? The only thing that he's appealing to is the audience watching. And I feel like that's why he disappeared for 3 days and trying to, absolve himself, because people were calling him out. He wants to run away. But he has a fake fucking name and he's gonna get in documentaries, so he finds it fucking funny. That call was the reason I wanted to make this video, because I found it so kind of disgusting. And I saw this kind of turn in the conversation where people were finally being like, yeah, you're disgusting for what you did. It's not funny. It really isn't funny, what you did to Daniel. It's not funny. Instead of trying to get him help, which some managers, to be fair, have tried to do.
Community college, and I know literally nothing. So, I am gonna say I won't be answering any more calls anymore. This is probably the last time we'll ever talk. But you don't, that's the thing, Daniel.
But it's Daniel doesn't really understand anything. You cannot leave him alone. You can't trust him to be alone. He needs to be monitored. He needs to be cared for, right? But it's I feel like a lot of these disability housings, I feel like a lot of these things, they're not equipped to handle him. They're not equipped. And when they are, they just don't, they let him have his phone. They let him have this. They don't put him on medication. They don't do this. It's you need to have Daniel on medication. You need to have him in an environment where he feels safe and he isn't fucking paranoid. You know what I'm saying? But it's it's gonna take years of work to get him somewhat stable now. And I don't think fucking federal prison is gonna be a good place for that. you know, I hope this like opens a new perspective and a new dialogue for mental health in these kind of communities, where it's like, you know, just because someone has a mental disorder or some kind of handicap that they need to be made fun of. And in that same sense, I'm gonna be making a video on Chris Chan in this sort of kind of same format. Of course, I'm not gonna defend anything Chris Chan's done, but I will defend, you know, kind of a younger Chris and like the start of the trolling and explain why like that was kind of fucked up. But I'm hoping you all really like this video. I'm probably gonna make a few more like this, but I'm not sure. Let me know if, you know, you want me to make a video on anyone else that didn't deserve trolling, or who does. I might make a video on White Bowser, might make a video on a few other people who kind of do deserve, you know, this kind of treatment. Might go into them a little bit, but of course I don't want to make the same video about the same person everyone else is making a video on. I don't want to do that, you know, but anyways, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I think you're very sexy.